Everyone, what is going on? It is Crypto Bobby. Hope you are having a great day, great night, wherever you are watching in from. I have a special guest for you this morning. It is Jordan from Hashgraph. How you doing today, Jordan?
Good. How you doing?
I am doing very well. I appreciate you taking the time, and apologies to anybody who's been waiting in the chat room for the past 10, 15 minutes or so. I'm not always the greatest with setting up Skype and or Google Hangout interviews, so it always takes me some extra time, so I appreciate you sticking by there as well. But just hopping right into it, I know from just the kind of tweets and everything like that, I've heard a lot of you guys are excited for this conversation. But Jordan, quick background as far as where you've personally been and how you got involved with Hashgraph. Would love to hear your personal background.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of an interesting story. I spent the last 7 years in Budapest, Hungary, in the middle of Central Europe. Hungary's the country sandwiched between Austria and Ukraine. Went to Budapest, ended up starting a VPN company, virtual private network service. And one of my first realizations back when I first moved there in 2011 was I wasn't going to be able to watch the American version of Netflix or even the videos on ESPN.com or anything like that. So I built it originally for myself, ended up giving it to a few friends, and then it became a full-fledged company where I quit my job. And we started growing, scaled a team in Hungary. My introduction into what we're doing now, into this distributed ledger technology space, you could say came back in 2013, 2014, when we started integrating BitPay and various other payment processors to try to take Bitcoin as a payment method, right? Have an anonymous payment method to go with your anonymity service. When Buffered was acquired in 2017, frankly, I was lost and depressed. Definitely accomplished the goal, and grew the company to the point where it was worth something to someone who wanted to acquire it, but didn't really know what to do next. And I ended up having a lot of spare time on my hands, jumped really deep into a bunch of white papers, one of which was Hashgraph. And at that stage, it was sort of serendipitous. I met Lehman Baird and Mance Harmon in New York City in the summer of 2017.
Nice.
And joined the team full time after making an angel investment in Swirlds. Currently, I serve as the head of global business development for the company. And what that really means is there's really two separate businesses we're going to talk about, Bobby. You've got Swirlds, where that's our permission business, right? You could compare that to a Hyperledger or an R3's Corda, right? Mm-hmm. What we do at Hedera is something completely different. Hedera is our attempt to address the public marketplace. So when we talk about Hashgraph, there's really the two different offerings. There's this consensus algorithm for permission networks, and then this consensus algorithm to address the public networks.
Sure. So for those who might not be kind of familiar with why those two offerings are in existence, could you maybe dive into that a little bit deeper as far as kind of maybe the individuals or the entities that one would be a good fit for as opposed to the other?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And that's a really great question. So any use case could be both. But what happens is that there's regulation. Let's take in the healthcare space. There may be HIPAA compliance where you have to really store and encrypt patient data. You can't just store that out in the public or in the open. So if it's a healthcare use case, this is something that you might put in a permission setting instead of a public setting. If you're a bank, you probably want to store your stuff in a more permissioned environment where you own all the nodes. The definition of a permissioned environment from our perspective is really that all the nodes are known. You're establishing the IP address. Literally in our system, how that works is you install the SDK, you launch a config file, and you specify all the IP addresses of all the nodes in your network.
Okay.
So this is permissioned. In a public network, it's different. In a public network, you'd have the dynamic adding and dropping off of nodes. Anyone could be a node. And that's really how we define the two. Our vision for Hedera is that a single mom in Australia could put a node on the network, gossip about gossip, participate in our consensus process, and make enough money to pay for her car payment on a monthly basis.
Sure. So I guess it would be safe to say in a lot of respects that probably the level of familiarity that people end up having with Hashgraph will be on the more Hedera-focused side, the permissionless side, as kind of the permission side is going to be more maybe industry specific or a little bit more closed off in nature by obviously intention?
Yeah, it's a great observation. Let's be honest, Bobby. Public networks are sexy right now. It's everyone's talking about it. You built a really amazing YouTube show and channel based on it. So, I'm not gonna beat around the bush. Hashgraph has gained notoriety and has gained public awareness because of our intent to address the public marketplace.
Sure.
And of course, there was a bunch of sensationalist headlines that helped along the way. But here we are.
So for people who aren't familiar with the technology behind it, how would you describe Hashgraph, and how is it different from some of the other distributed ledger technologies that are currently in existence today that people are more familiar with perhaps?
Yeah, so there's really nothing like it in the market. And let's start by talking about what Hashgraph isn't. Hashgraph isn't blockchain. It's literally not a chain of blocks. It's a directed acyclic graph. It's a simple and elegant algorithm that was invented by Dr. Baird. It's mathematically proven, and nothing is theoretical. Everything is implemented in software, which I think is really exciting because many of the other projects in the space, and I'm not going to call anyone out by name, they simply go out and do these massive raises on white papers. And that's not what you're seeing here. We've been in the market and have tremendous enterprise adoption and have done so for several years. So right off the bat, I would say that's very different. If we're talking purely tech, I would divide the industry into a few different spaces. You could say that there's leader-based algorithms represented by Hyperledger and Corda and these permissioned environments where there's a leader setting the total order of transactions. Massive security vulnerabilities. All the members in that network know the IP address of the leader. If it's a disgruntled employee or a hacker gets a hold of any node in the network, they would disclose the IP address of the leader, and anyone, me, you, your mom, anyone could direct a denial of service attack at the leader, take the entire network down. Massive security vulnerabilities there. The other markets that probably most of your listeners are familiar with, proof of work blockchain,
Sure.
Really inefficient, $20 per transaction in Bitcoin. Big cliff note here is that it's not fair. When a miner wins the right to add a block to the chain, the miner sets the total order of transactions in that block. So you're not going to run a whole genre of use cases that require fairness, that require a total order or a fair order of transactions. Okay, so I'd point that out. You're also not going to do more than 7 to 12 transactions per second. I believe Ethereum today is about 12 transactions per second on the mainnet. Yep. So massive limitations there. That's proof of work. Markets moving, you know this, your listeners know this, markets moving to Casper economy-based systems. I'm not going to dwell on this too much because it rests on a flawed assumption. And the flawed assumption is that every node will act rationally. Every node will do what's in his or her best interest to maximize the amount of money that node can earn. But that's a really bad assumption when you can direct a virus to cause a node to act irrationally. What we really want to know, Bobby, is can one node disrupt consensus? Can one node take the entire network down? Economy-based systems cannot sufficiently answer that question. So what we've seen happen, where we got here, how Hashgraph came about, it's a really interesting story in that in 2012, Dr. Baird started working on this problem. Started, gave up. Most people thought this was impossible. But as it turns out, there's a whole class of algorithms dating back 30 years called voting-based algorithms. And fundamentally, they have the best security that is possible in a distributed system. You cannot do better. It's called asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant, ABFT for short. And how a voting-based system works is that every node on the network submits a vote. Right? You cannot do better than that in terms of security. The network waits for every vote to be submitted to come to consensus, but it's not practical because no one's ever deployed a voting-based system. You'd be waiting forever to come to consensus. Mm-hmm. So to our knowledge, to Dr. Baird's knowledge, no one's ever deployed one of these. It just wouldn't work. It has unrealistic bandwidth requirements. What Dr. Baird did, and this is the breakthrough, and this is what happened in the fall of 2015, Dr. Baird realized that by adding 2 small bytes of information to every transaction, by adding the cryptographic hash of the last transaction in a node's local copy of the database, and by adding another hash of the last transaction that node has received from another participant in the network. By adding these two small hashes to every transaction, in blockchain you'd call this a block, in Hashgraph we call it an event. But by adding these two small hashes to an event, you're able to remove the need to vote. What you get is you get this data structure that starts to form. You get this graph of cryptographic hashes, hence the name Hashgraph.
Yep.
And this enables some really exciting things to happen. One, you get this ABFT security property. No network has ever done it. Many in the network, many in the community claim to have ABFT, but it's not ABFT because if you look closely, they call it ABFT secure or ABFT something else. It's not really ABFT by the academic definition dating back 30 years. Okay. What Hashgraph is purely ABFT by the academic definition of it. It is the fastest consensus algorithm in the market in a single shard, where we're doing more than 500,000 transactions per second in the speed test that we released in New York City just a few weeks back. And it's fair. We have what is a consensus timestamp, which is a median community timestamp on every transaction, where you're able to use that to do some really cool applications. As it turns out, you can build an MMORPG where the community can come to consensus without any centralized gaming infrastructure that Bobby shot Jordan before Jordan shot Bobby, now Jordan's dead, right? So you're going to be able to run World of Warcraft on something like this. You're going to be able to run a stock market or an auction. All of these things are now possible. Nice. So to sum it all up, and sorry for the long-winded answer to your question, Hashgraph is fast, Hashgraph is fair, Hashgraph is secure. Nothing like this has ever existed before. This is what is enabling a whole new genre of applications, including mission-critical applications that are going to be deployed and that are already in production now on Hedera.
Sure. So that kind of goes into maybe one of the questions that I was thinking about asking, and maybe it got covered a little bit, but if I'm a software engineer, if I'm a developer, why would I go through the process of developing my application or my DApp or whatever it might be on top of Hashgraph, maybe in comparison to Ethereum or to Neo or to any of these other kind of like third gen IOTA, to any of these other like third gen platforms out there that people might be considering developing applications based off within the blockchain or distributed ledger technology type world right now?
Man, that's a great question, and I'm really happy that you asked that, namely because that's what I spend all of my time dwelling on. It's the first thing I think about in the morning and typically the last thing before bed. I know that may sound pathetic, but that's what we're building. We're building that ecosystem, and here's the services, right? These services are, we call them micropayments. You can think of them as microtransactions, but it's micropayments as a service through a native wallet and through a cryptocurrency. There is no Plasma, there's no Lightning, there's no need for a sidechain scaling solution because we do this native on the Hashgraph. You don't have to sacrifice any security to use that feature. So that's number one. And I'll talk about some killer use cases in a minute on why I think that is going to change the entire world. But there's also a distributed file store. That's also a killer app. What you have in the market is you have immutability. And immutability is cool, right? You have this amazing audit trail, but some people want controlled mutability. What I mean by controlled mutability is GDPR is coming to effect next month in May. And any company that's not in compliance with global data protection regulation in the EU, and I think China is going to adopt a similar regime shortly, any company, including Facebook, that's not in compliance with GDPR in Europe is going to be taxed at 4% of their global revenue. That's a big tax for someone like Facebook to pay or someone like Uber to pay. So controlled mutability is a feature with Hashgraph. So that's really exciting. It's actually determined at the application level. If you want to program into the application, if you want to program in immutability, you can do so. If you want to program controlled mutability where you can go back and delete a record or credential, this is important for many identity applications, including where you have a DMV issuing a credential and you need to revoke it. This is a killer application in itself. Okay, and then you have smart contracts. Smart contracts in Hashgraph on Hedera are through Solidity at day one. I actually just saw this in New York City with some of our developers there, saw the demo of this. It's insane. What we have is we have the ability to run and execute any Solidity script, an ERC20 token, for example, and be able to run that on our platform. And there's a massive queue that's already formed for people that want to use that. I've tested it personally with existing Solidity scripts that we pulled off GitHub or we pulled off Reddit or from somewhere else. and it's worked flawlessly. What you do, what we've done there is instead of paying the gas price in Ether, you pay it in our native Hashgraph Hedera token. We've not released the name of it, but we will shortly. That's what you'll pay that transaction fee in. So why would someone build on it? One, you've got those services. Two, we offer those services at next to nothing. It's as close to free as possible. The actual transaction fee, well, we just talked that in Bitcoin, it's close to $20 to do a transaction on the network. When Bitcoin was $20,000 per Bitcoin, it was close to $80 per transaction. On Hedera, the actual transaction fee is a fraction of a penny. It's close to free. And that number is actually decided by the governance council. Sure. But because of our ability to do massive TPS, massive throughput, you can run these micro payment applications. You can run an IoT application like a Philips Hue device where all your light bulbs are connected to one central hub. You can do things like this and not have to worry about expensive transaction fees. So that's one big reason. I think it's just going to be economical to develop on us. Two, we're using aspects of what's already available in the open source community. You can use Solidity, those that already know it. Why would you deploy a Solidity script on the Ethereum mainnet when you can do it on Hedera? Some of these questions people are already starting to ask themselves. In addition to that, and I think this is a really important, unique point, we are creating a suite of self-service tools. One is a curriculum. One is a let me talk about the curriculum for a second. It's this full curriculum you walk through to become a Hashgraph certified developer. It's our definition of what it means to be Hashgraph certified, but it teaches you how to develop for our main and state framework, how to build applications, and then how to go and deploy them. So that's a really exciting use case. Or that's a really exciting thing for developers to do on the platform. And we've also scaled a team of developer advocates that help support that development ecosystem as they're building their applications. Now, those developer advocates, they write code, they can troubleshoot code, they sit in our Discord community. They're amazing people. They sit in our biz dev team, we call it, but it's really developer advocacy, and they're available to the community. So I'd say those are some of the really exciting reasons why people would build on it and are building on it.
Gotcha. And so one thing that I think there were a lot of questions on, or I've seen this around quite a bit, and I figured it'd probably be good to address it, but kind of considering the foundation of Bitcoin and a lot of other blockchain or distributed ledger technology being open source or having a lot of that information publicly available on a GitHub. And then I've seen some different comments as far as maybe Hashgraph not being as open source. Is there reasoning behind that, and how would you address when someone says, Hashgraph is closed source, it's not open source, yep. it's not in the spirit of DLT technology? How would you or the other folks at Hashgraph kind of address that?
Yeah, it's. I'm so glad you asked this. So let's talk about the spirit of DLT technology. The spirit of DLT technology, distributed systems, it's still forming. This whole space is in its infancy, right? Everyone's on their high horse thinking that their project is going to change the world, and that's great. But fundamentally, we do not have mission-critical applications deployed on it. The public network space is riddled with problems, and they're all attributed to a lack of governance. At Bitcoin, you have core fighting among developers, right? I'm not a popular guy in the space for saying that. I get hate tweets all the time on my Twitter feed for saying stuff like this. But Bitcoin Core has problems, and Pablo Escobar's brother right now has created a fork of the Bitcoin chain to create Diet Bitcoin.
I'm going all in on Diet Bitcoin.
Yeah, all in, right? You can't make this stuff up, Bobby, right? It's just like it's chaos out there. It's the Wild West. So it should be no surprise to the people in the community that governments and authorities and regulators just simply don't trust the space. They just simply, it's the Wild West out here. So I gotta just address Ethereum for a second. Vitalik's brilliant. He's sort of once in a generation mind that is he's incredible. But we have to call it like it is, and that's that he's the benevolent dictator right now of Ethereum. His comments most recently in Seoul indicate that there's social problems in the Ethereum community, especially when it comes to adopting Casper and on the Casper testnet. There's a rent-seeking problem there, tragedy of the commons, where Ethereum just scaled too fast, too quickly, and it's not yet clear what the path forward there is. what we've done is we've taken a starting point that dated back to the 1960s, where we started with a model, and that model was created by a guy named D. Hawk. He wrote a book called One from Many, and that's the Visa model. Sure. What you're really seeing now is I believe, is the rise of these chaotic organizations where you see these industry consortia forming in the Trusted IoT Alliance or the Telemanagement Forum that works on many exciting blockchain projects. What the Hedera Council, what the Hedera body is, it's just one of those bodies that instills the trust to the mainstream, puts the governance policies and procedures in place so that you can build this 100, 200, even 1,000-year organization that's living, breathing, self-sustaining, governs itself. So that's that bit. But why the patent, right? Let's address the elephant in the room. Why the patent? Why are people saying it's closed source? As it turns out, when you look at an open source community, an open source community has fundamentally great principles. The value of being part of an open source community is everyone contributes their best source code. The high tide raises all ships. We all benefit from everyone's code. As it turns out, when you combine that with the cryptocurrency, you create chaos. You create this collision in the market where all of a sudden me, Bobby, and all of Bobby's listeners, we can go create Bobby Bitcoin, go fork the Bitcoin main chain, do our launch, say that we're the real Bitcoin, really following Satoshi's vision. And many people have done that, right? We're the real Bitcoin. We could buy bitcoin.org or bitcoin.com or bitcoin.network or whatever is available, claim we're the real Bitcoin core, and we're billionaires overnight, man. I mean, we're billionaires, right? People have done this. People are doing this. I'm not going to name names. Everyone knows who I'm talking about. These guys have done it. There's many other people who are going to do it. Today, there's 4 different flavors of Bitcoin. There's probably going to be 6, 7, or 8 this year. So when you have open source with crypto, it does not work. It just cannot work. So what we've done is we didn't patent it to hide the code. With version 1 of the code, we are going to be completely transparent. You will not need a license to build on us. You don't even have to talk to us to build on us. You simply need a little bit of the base token, the platform coin in your wallet to make API calls to the network to use those services. You don't have to talk to me, okay? That's really exciting. But more importantly, here's the guarantee and here's the promise. And hold me to this because I'm going to say this to all your listeners and I say this on your channel. Hedera will not fork. That's the guarantee. Hedera is going to be and is, because of the governance body, because of our technical and legal controls, Hedera is the stable platform that mainstream mission-critical organizations will build on. Sure. It's the platform that your grandma will feel comfortable using. That's who we built it for. That's what we have in mind. And nothing else in the market can make that claim and comes even close.
So one thing you had mentioned was in regards to the governance council, and I think it's 39 entities, I believe, or something in that range.
That's right. That's right.
Can you talk a little bit about how that's going to be constructed? Because it sounds like, if there's maybe proper diversity within those entities, then that could, certainly lead to an efficient governance. But maybe if there's some level of, I don't want to say centralization, but like similar ideologies, then maybe that could potentially be a negative thing. I would love to hear about how the governance council how those 39 entities will be created and how that will kind of lead to a better experience for a lot of people.
Yeah, this is great. So I want to really make this point. Hashgraph, Hedera Hashgraph is open consensus. Sure. Everyone can participate in consensus, right? That's the plan. That's where we're going long term, okay? But it is permission governance in that what you're doing is you're trusting this mainstream body that has industry expertise to come to consensus on some key decisions like the technical roadmap, the monetary policy, and pulling various levers that traditionally a central banker or a Fed chair would pull. Okay. The only difference here is that all the 39 come together. Now, who are they? They are geo-distributed first across the globe. We have members on more than 5 different continents now, and they are best in their respective industries. They're best in class. We're talking about multi-billion-dollar, multinational companies, many of whom have been around for more than 200 plus years that have become behemoths of their respective industries and can contribute their expertise. We have one of the largest law firms on the planet who's contributing legal expertise. We have one of the largest banks on the European continent who's contributing financial services expertise and banking expertise to the platform. We have a very large retail giant, e-commerce giant down in South America that's participating as an associate member, not a governing member. There's a distinction there, but an associate member also contributing expertise to the council. So what we're doing is building this geo-diverse group, but also diverse across industry sectors. And what you have here is you have a council where it's very unlikely that just as a hypothetical example, an Australian FMCG, fast-moving consumer good manufacturer, is very unlikely to collude with a European telecom giant, right? These things are much more unlikely to take place. So it's not Ripple. It's not a consortium or a council of banks. We're capping banks at just 2 or 3 banks. We're capping telecoms at just 2 or 3 telcos. We're capping insurance companies at just 2 or 3. We're only going to have 2 or 3 law firms. Sure. And that's what this council is. Now, to date, we've not announced any members. I can allude, I already have, as to who some of these are. Again, really some of the most respected brands. If you were to play, Bobby, have you ever played one of those logo quiz games? You're like sitting on an airplane and they show you a bunch of logos, but remove the font. You got to guess which company it is.
So. Yeah, I think
yeah.
So.
Okay. So if anyone listening is familiar with these, everyone listening would know the logos. We're talking about the ones that we trust, the places we keep our money, the places we get our health insurance, the places we buy the food from. Right? They're trusted to create the stability, to assign their experts, to stand up nodes on the network, and they have an incentive to do so. In their defense, they have an incentive to do so. They own that body. They own that group. Now, I want to make a really important point, because at day one, these are the traction days, we form the council, right? So you could make that argument that, oh, well, Jordan and Mance Harmon and Tom Trowbridge and a bunch of other guys at Hedera have picked this body. Yeah. And to that, I would say that the governance body has a set of policies and terms that govern the membership. And one of them is a membership committee that's responsible for replacing members. Let's say one of them goes bankrupt, or let's say one of them gets acquired. The seat does not get handed on to the acquirer. The other thing is that all members are term limited. So after 2-3 year terms, when a membership expires, a member, let's say a banking member gets voted out, and a new bank needs to come in and replace them. Now, maybe after another term, that original member comes back, but that's how this council is going to work to prevent stagnation. And you keep fresh people in there that are interested in actively keeping the platform going. You really don't have to trust them because they have an economic incentive: 1, not to collude, and 2, they have a profit center where they actually own 1/39 of that body. Now, who are we and what's our involvement? We are Swirlds. Swirlds is just 1/39. We don't own the body. The body is chaotic. It's owned by the members and controlled by the members.
Totally. Can you talk a little bit in regards to the roadmap? I know you had a big launch event in New York City recently, but would love to hear about the roadmap, maybe on both ends of the spectrum, from Hedera Hashgraph and then from the more permission side of the house. How are those roadmaps moving? Are they somewhat side by side? Or are they progressing at different paths and paces as well?
Yeah, in full disclosure, it's all hands on deck for Hedera, right? We've been working on Hedera for a very long time. We knew that to do a public network right, like Hedera, you would need the right tech to get the tech to a more formalized place, to have a stable platform, and we're there today. You would need the legal and technical controls to have stability. You would need the governance body. All of these things are really important. And of course, security. I'd be remiss not to mention security. You needed the ABFT. We always had that. So with all these things, that's what we needed. In terms of technical roadmap, our roadmap and our core focus is all on Hedera for easily the next 18 to 24 months, where we're hiring very rapidly. Our focus is on building the ecosystem. Our focus is on adding some new killer features to the platform that aren't there today and that I can't yet talk about because they're very private in development. But again, let me talk about Lehman for a second. Lehman is a guy who obsesses over problems, right? Comes up with a problem and cannot stop thinking about it until it's solved. So in 2012, when people said it was impossible to do what the Hashgraph is doing today, he said, I'm going to find a way to do it. And he figured out a way to do it. He's one of those minds, and he's done that in many places. Just yesterday, he was obsessing over why he doesn't have wireless charging throughout his entire home. And he sketched out on a whiteboard a plan to add wireless charging to his home. And it blew me away. I'm like, that in itself could have been like $1 billion business, right? And you're looking at it and you're like, Lehman, Hedera, right? So we're all heads down focused on that. He goes, yes. In 10 years, I'll come back and work on this problem if someone hasn't solved it already. So that's what he does. He's just got this notebook on all these crazy ideas. Our roadmap, our focus is going to be on coming to market with those 3 services I mentioned: smart contracts through Solidity, distributed file store with revocation service, and our micropayments. And in the future, what we hope to offer are different types of smart contracts that would also be open source. Maybe you wouldn't have to do them in Solidity, and there's many reasons why you wouldn't want to do them in Solidity, and we may offer that. In addition to that, we will probably turn back focus and go back to our permission business and continue to build up enterprise adoption, as I think there's a huge market as that's being addressed by companies like Corda and companies like Hyperledger and IBM's doing this, and Coco, the Azure guys at Microsoft, are doing this. So there's a massive space to play in permission networks. Our philosophy, Bobby, is that just like you have public cloud and private cloud, there's always going to be demand for permission networks and public networks. I see a really interesting future where you have a whole set of use cases in permission networks that then, for example, where maybe a bank is keeping account balances here, but then when they want to do a cross-border international payment, they settle it over a public network to another permission network in another country. So we see really exciting use cases for, I call them private to public settlement use cases. Sure. These are all really just starting to form. In terms of roadmap, what I'm really excited about is IoT. It's just, I think you're going to have trillions and trillions of dollars of hardware value that is brought online and speaking to each other through these consensus algorithms that, frankly, it scares me. It feels like Skynet, sounds like Skynet. You have these Boston Dynamic robots that are probably going to be coming to consensus with each other on, are we going to listen to the owner? Are we not going to listen to our master? Are we going to open this door? Are we not going to open this door? Doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And I'm really excited about IoT. I think a lot of exciting stuff is going to happen there. And just a hint about that, we're working with Machine Zone and Satori. Gabriel Layden was at our launch event and talked a little bit about what they're doing. There's so much more behind that and behind what Lit Token is doing that we're really excited to be the platform for.
Sure. And you had mentioned Solidity a few different times, and I guess one question I have there on Solidity was the decision to leverage Solidity from a smart contract and like programming language perspective, was that mainly made to encourage quick adoption from the people that are already programming on top of Ethereum, or there were other specific advantages that you saw within this, or that your team saw within Solidity that made it attractive? Curious, because I think when I was talking to Charles Hoskinson at Cardano, they have like an ability to basically port over Solidity to Cardano to increase user adoption, to increase the number of developers that can start leveraging the platform as quick as possible. Kind of wondering if that's done for speed of development, or if there were specific advantages you guys saw within Solidity as well.
So I wouldn't say that there were specific advantages. It was just that it's been adopted. It has a lot of eyeballs on that code base. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have done ICOs with it. A lot of people are working now on securitizing real world assets with different forms of an ERC. And we saw an opportunity to appeal to the Solidity community at large to say, one, we'll help you migrate these things over. There's many mechanisms for how you would do this. You could do a proof of burn, where you simply, technically, you'd send it at an address and prove that the token was burned on the Ethereum mainnet and then reissue it over on the Hashgraph, the Hedera mainnet, for example. We wanted to first start that in phase 1 as our own offering point. Or just to cater to that community. We see ourselves, by the way, as a very collaborative company. I wouldn't talk very critically about everything else in the space. I would say that if developers in the space want to use Solidity, it's our job to make the ease of transition to a new platform comply with what the ERC20, what the Solidity standards are, and that's what we've done. Sure. So that's really, I'll leave it at that, and I'll say that there will be other ways to leverage smart contracts and other ways to do smart contracts. There already are in the ecosystem. You can do them in Java, you can do them in Python. I think these will start to come, and we would offer them, and of course open source it so the community can continue to develop and evolve them over time.
Sure. And kind of as we're coming up on the end of the hour here, one question I would have, is there anything maybe that I didn't cover that you feel like you would like to tell the people watching in regards to Hashgraph? Anything maybe perhaps I missed?
I see a lot of FUD out in the space that, I'm just thinking, I'm going to address this. I'm just going to address this head on. I think that a lot of people in the space are very binary about it's open source, it's not open source, or here's this opportunity to invest in this thing that's going to go to the moon. And there's a lot of speculators out there that get really upset when they don't see an opportunity to 100x their tokens. What we are building, Bobby, like full transparency. I'm going to get really real with you. Can I get emotional for a second? I want to talk to you. I don't see enough people building real companies in this space. I don't see enough people really building 100-year companies, things that have real enterprise people involved, that have people that are going for the long game, people that are trying to establish legacy, people that are in it for the wrong reasons, people that are getting arrested because the SEC is putting them in handcuffs because they had Floyd Mayweather pumping their stuff. And but it gives us a bad name, right? Yeah. I get phone calls from my mom like, are you going to go to jail and stuff? And I'm like, absolutely not. We work with some of the most respected large law firms in the world. This is a very legitimate space. But to make it more legitimate, here's what we're actually doing, right? Here's why I'm doing this. Why I'm waking up every day is at the end of life, you're going to come down to how you made your money. Number one is far more important than how much you make. And we're doing this to build a company and a platform that will change the internet. We see Hedera Hashgraph as the trust layer that sits one layer above the internet and that solves many problems. It's the way that the internet should have been from the very beginning. We just didn't have the tech to do it. Sure. It's this peer-to-peer distributed web. And we're very aligned with what the ethos of the entire space is. What we're doing is we're capitalizing this company that's going to go and address that and take that to the market. And what we're doing is we're simply providing the tools and the platform to the community. And this is why I'm up at 5:30 in the morning here in Dallas, Texas, doing what I do every single day. But this is the labor of love. And my hope is that people give Hedera and give Hashgraph a chance, enough so to get to know Dr. Baird, enough so to get to know Mance Harmon, who are family-oriented people, who are brilliant minds that are going to change the internet. And we're full steam ahead. And I want to give more insight and more transparency into what's happening behind the scenes, which is I'm here at this offsite where we've got our core developers together. We've got our technical team and we've got business planning sessions, and we're planning for the long term. I don't think it's a question in 100 years about if DLT or if blockchain is going to be here. I don't think it's a question of if Hashgraph is going to be here. In the future, I think it's, yes, Hashgraph's a dominant platform, and it's not if people are using it, it's what implementation of the Hashgraph people are using. The last thing I'd say is, and I'm going to make a bold claim, and I've made this before, but I want your listeners to hold me to it. And this is my KPI. My KPI is winning Dr. Baird the Turing Award. My KPI is making sure that the Hashgraph consensus algorithm, this fundamental breakthrough in computer science, is appreciated, is adopted. And I certainly hope that the regulators and the policymakers out there give us the opportunity and don't hinder the development and the of this ecosystem. Sure. And enable us to do that. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are all good comments, and I think that, there's definitely, I mean, just from what I've seen, there's going to be criticisms regardless. Whatever you're doing in space, there's always going to be criticism. Of course. And it's maybe a more, the approach that your team is taking is a different approach to that some people are taking, but there is a specific reasoning and a measured reasoning why you guys are doing that. So I do think it makes a lot of sense, and obviously the technology behind it in many ways is starting to speak for itself. So it'll be really interesting to see, how things end up panning out. But I appreciate the fact that you were actually able to kind of address the comments that people have been making in regards to, closed source or patent or whatever it might be, and kind of the specific way that you guys are taking action in the space. So I'm I'm excited to see how things end up moving forward for Hashgraph and the level of developer adoption and the level of adoption that you get on the entire platform. So I think it should be really, really interesting and fun to watch, and also see from a market perspective how that ends up working out too.
Bobby, I'm excited for you, man. I mean, I pinch myself every day that I get to wake up and do this. You know, I'm tremendously grateful. I can't believe it's real life. I have a wife and an 18-month-old kid, and you know, when it comes, we're all having dinner together, and my kid doesn't talk yet. So I look at my wife and I'm like, I can't believe that this is what we get to do, right? Feels like a dream. Feels too good to be true.
Yeah, totally.
And look at yourself. You built this tremendous platform where you have more than 100,000 people, subscribers on your channel, and this incredible community that you built. I think it's a really special time to be alive. A really special time to be alive, doing what we're doing. You know, what you folks are working on with your YouTube channel as an individual, and then what you're working on in the space and the tech and the team you're working with. I'm just enjoying it, and I'm having a lot of fun, and I want people to know that. And I'm excited to continue to share more, and maybe even come back on here or bring some other folks from our team back on here and maybe break some news, or when we have something to announce, share it with your listeners first.
Yeah, that'd be tremendous. And I know I really do appreciate all the questions from everybody in the comments. I've been kind of keeping an eye on everything as much as possible, so I appreciate all the questions, the comments there. Thank you to everybody for that, and thank you as well, Jordan, for taking the time to come on here, especially early in the morning. I know popping into the kitchen. It looks like in the office I'm in this co-working space in Dallas, Texas somewhere. So I'm happy to do it, Bobby. Hey, congrats on everything you're working on too, and thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, thanks a lot for the time. I appreciate it. Have a good one, everybody.